Hello, Business 301 class. I'm Levi, and we're going to be talking about Chapter 11 and Chapter 12 today. And as you can tell, we're kind of doing a Kahoot style. So there are going to be some questions. If you can't join it, but if you can answer those questions, write them down. And then part of the questions is going to be, just noting, how many of those questions you got right, just for fun to keep it a little bit more interactive. So as I said, I'm Levi.
I'm Abigail.
And I'm Daniel.
And we're covering the human resource management and diversity in organization sections of the reading.
That's a tough one. They're all very close.
So talking a little about Introduction to Human Resource Management. Human resource management has kind of evolved over the years. They explain it as coming in waves. And there are 4 waves that it comes in as it's kind of developed over time. And really each wave is kind of defined by more and more responsibility that human resources and HR has taken over in time. So for example, in wave 1, that mainly focused on administrative work, whereas wave 2 focused on the design of innovative HR practices such as payroll, learning, communication, and sourcing. And then as time went on later, 15 or 20, and these are long periods of time, 15, 20 years is how long they've been going, each wave. So wave 3 has a lot to do with the integration of HR strategy with the overall business strategy. And then wave 4 has a lot to deal with how HR continues to be a partner to the business, but has also become a competitive practice for responding to external business conditions. So for those of you who have worked in a business where there's an HR, HR doesn't only handle internal business operations, sometimes they deal with outside business operations as well. And really, HR is a huge part of any business in the modern world today. And human resources management includes leadership and facilitation of the following key cycle processes: human resource compliance, employee selection, hiring and onboarding, performance management, compensation, rewards and benefits, talent development, and succession planning. And during the first half of our presentation, we're kind of going to go through each of those piece by piece. So the answer there was yes, the FSLA does fall under that compliance. And so human resource compliance is a huge part of HR. It's an area that traces back to the very origin of human resources and administrative regulatory functions. So compliance continues to be a very important area that HR manages. And there are numerous regulations and laws that govern employer and employee relationships. So, there's the FSLA, which is the Fair Labor Standards Act. We've all heard, we should all be informed of these at any sort of job that we have. Age and discrimination, for those who have wives that are pregnant, or those who are going to be having children and are working. There's also the Family and Medical Leave Act that gives you those 12 weeks unpaid, so that you can be with your baby once they're born. And then there's American with Disabilities Act. You can't discriminate against people just because they're disabled. And a lot of this compliance, it sounds like common sense things, but when you look at cases when the compliance and the laws have been broken, there's simple things that people don't tend to really recognize. So it's important that each business has a policy or a handbook to follow that outlines these laws, so that they can be legally compliant with government acts. So if you just think about any job you've had before, you've probably, starting from basic jobs like food business, There's always that big poster by like where you wash your hands in the back room where it says know your rights, and it talks about like compensation and benefits, that you can't be discriminated against. And if you end up in a business where there's HR, typically on during your onboarding on process, you're given a handbook that goes over your company policies, and they inform you of all of these rules and acts that you have to comply with, that they won't discriminate against you and you're not allowed to discriminate against others. And I'm sure too, for those of us who aren't working, and if you're just studying right now, if you ever go on Indeed.com or ZipRecruiter and you look at job applications, they oftentimes have little like disclaimers at the bottom of the application that says that they're compliant with certain laws. You know, they don't discriminate if you have like any sort of like felonies. They don't discriminate based on age, or if you are pregnant while you're applying for jobs, because if they do so, that's illegal. So human resources helps protect employers and employees from any sort of legal harm.
Perfect. The next topic we're going to be talking about is performance management. And we're going to be kind of covering over accountability and the challenges that can come with performance management. So performance management, interestingly, actually kind of started in the 1960s, and companies used performance management as a system to develop employees into supervisors and managers, into executives, because they had a really big shortage for managerial talent. And so they used the performance management to, instead of hiring for those things, to use the employees they had to fill those roles as those roles became available. Some challenges that can come with performance management. At times it can create an environment of unhealthy competition, can exist if it's not implemented correctly. A big thing for that is, especially if it's hyper focused on, just the numbers, a lot of sales roles, you'll hear at times, just numbers, sales. I've had that experience in the past where it's a very unhealthy environment because it's very much focused on sales, and the whole aspect of taking care of each other, working as a team, and taking care of the client just kind of goes out the window, because your main goal and worry is, I want to get the most sales. If I get the most sales, I'm going to get the most money, I'm going to get paid the most, and that's all you care about. And it's a very unhealthy environment. It can also lead to undermined collaboration and teamwork. That can be a challenge, just because obviously if you're not working well as a team, if there's people who think they're better than one another, it's hard for them to operate with other teammates, and all in all, that person may achieve their goals, but as a team and as a company overall, you're gonna have a really challenging time meeting your metric because of that. And another thing as well is, it's easy to identify potentially poor performers. In this case, with performance management, you can kind of see who's not hitting their goals and different things like that. But as we've learned as well, it's not all about the goals, as there's within the organization, it's not just about the goals, there's other things that go into it. And another interesting part about the poor performers is managers are often really reluctant to address the poor performers that they're seeing, because they're worried about hurting their feelings or losing them an employee. They're just worried about it. And so those poor performers, they don't get addressed, don't get talked to, they don't create a plan together to overcome the obstacles they're facing, or even learn the obstacles they're facing. And the next thing you know, that employee probably gets let go, and they never really understood the reason why behind it, what happened. Perfect. The next topic I'm going to cover is employee performance. So the employee performance, they talk about different strategies within this chapter. There's the pay for performance compensation program, there's merit metrics, there's a total reward strategy. There's a bunch of different things, but these main three things that they talked about: the pay for performance. As you can imagine, the better performers get paid the most money. Very competitive pay. It's often found in sales roles. I have personally seen that in many sales roles that I've had over the years. And it It's not really based on the experience, education you have. It's strictly based on how well are you performing. If you're performing better, you get paid more. If you're not performing, you don't get paid more. The merit metrics, this strategy is more tied to the annual performance, and they'll get like an annual pay increases depending on their performance level. I've had companies where based on how you did end of the year, you had a end of the year review, and then based on your feedback, your manager's feedback, and everything like that, then ultimately at the end of it, you would get a boost in your pay based on, or a bonus based on how well you scored on that annual review. And then the total reward strategy, there's 6 elements that this talks about in the chapter. It talks about compensation, benefits, work-life effectiveness, recognition, performance management, and talent development. These are the 6 elements of this total rewards package, and this is a way to attract, motivate, retain, and engage employees, because those are the main things that employees are often worried about. They're worried about what they get paid. They're worried about, okay, how good are the benefits? Work-life effectiveness. Am I going to have a life out of work? Recognition. Am I being recognized for the things that I'm doing? Or if I'm just being swept underneath the rug, the performance management, and then the talent development. Are they learning on the job? Are they able to feel like they're being educated to grow their skills? Those are all things that whenever I look at a job, subconsciously, I didn't really think about that. Those are all things that I look at every single time. What's the pay? What's the benefits? And what's all those things? Because all those things are important to me. And I'm sure all of us have done that to some point, whether or not we recognize it. We're doing a really good job. We're getting all the answers right. So hopefully you guys are.
Okay, so in talking about talent acquisition and how it applies to the hiring process in HR, it helps with selection, recruiting, and just hiring people in general. There was a big talk in the chapter about how important and critical talent is to bring onto your team instead of just understanding that people will learn over time. Although that is very important to allow people to learn and have the ability to grow through their experience working with the company, it's also important to spend time looking for employees that will really put in high performance from the very beginning, meaning that they have the talent, they have the background, they have the developed skills to be able to add value to your company, as well as retaining those employees. So it talks about helping to how talent acquisition will help anticipate your future leadership needs based on the strategic business plan that is created by HR, as well as identify the specific competencies required in each position and develop a sufficiently large candidate pool. So in the chapter, it talks about something called the war for talent, how it's really important that you try to remain competitive in the workforce through getting people, employees with a high talent. Though I do agree that it's important to even have entry-level positions where you teach people from the very beginning the things that you want them to do. I do think it's important to bring on people with at least a natural talent of something. For example, the current job I'm at right now, I do interior design for window coverings. Now, I had never done any kind of interior design when I was hired on, but I did have a hobby for it. I liked, helping people decorate. And my employer during the interview asked me how my ability to identify colors was. And for some, it may seem like, oh, well, yeah, I can identify colors, but in the interior design world, it gets really picky with interior colors, and meaning that there's 10 different shades of white. So it's really important that I had that initial talent of being able to actually have some sort of vision, even though I didn't know all of the skills in order to do the job itself. I still had to learn how to measure, how to pitch products, how to put bids together, and all of these other things that encompass my role. I did have the initial talent, and for that, I was able to be hired, and I view myself as a valuable asset to the company. And I think that when people are able to have at least some initial talent, it makes really good human capital, which is basically just adding assets to your company. Not that the company owns their employees, but being able to recruit people with talent and keep them is really, really critical to a good company. Okay, and going into talent development and succession planning, it was really interesting thinking that there is a way to plan how to help your employees grow in their talents. Just like I was saying in my current job, how I was able to learn all of these different aspects that go into doing my job functions. There was a plan before I was even hired on how to teach me those things. You go through the specific training, but I don't think that the talent development has to stop right after training. I'm continuously learning of how to improve and how to build up my skills so that I can be even more of an asset to the company. Something that it talks about in the chapter is like performance versus potential. And I think it would be important to add into your succession plan of how much time to spend on teaching in order to improve the performance. If you feel that the employee has the ability to perform high and they just don't understand the product, well, then you would want to take the time to teach them the product. But if you feel that it would be a waste of time to go into really detailed product training because this person has a background in whatever the role is, they would take the time to get a brief overview of what your specific products are and then allow them to go and start performing. It's important for HR to see those potentials when they hire people on. And just like how my employer was able to see the potential of teaching me how to measure and how to do spatial planning and things like this so that I could reach my full potential as their employee and become more valuable, even though all I knew from the very beginning was how to match colors. So it talks about some other indicators of potential when you're hiring someone. And it would say, some bullet points that it mentions is top performance in their current job, success in their other positions, education and certifications, significant accomplishments and events, and willingness and desire to advance. That's why resumes are so important, is because a lot of those things are also elements that we apply to our resume to basically showcase all of the events that we've been in charge of, all of the successes that we've had in our either current or previous employments, and the willingness that we have to advance.
Hopefully you guys like the funny memes that we have. We like them.
Yeah, if anyone's seen The Office, Diversity Day, or if you haven't seen The Office, Diversity Day is a good episode. If you're not easily offended, because diversity is important, and that is why it's important to HR. Or actually, this is we just moved into chapter 12. So this is the introduction to workplace diversity, and diversity is very, very important. We know, whenever you go on the news or online, oftentimes you'll hear about diversity not in the workplace, but just in the world in general, how it's important that we get unique ideas from different people and that we're open to getting new ideas from other people too. So diversity, it refers to identity-based differences among two or more people. You know, there's three of us here in this meeting right now. There's Levi, Abigail, and I. We are all different, and we all have different diversity identities. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So these differences, they can, the HR, it's important that they know how to manage these differences. A lot of the times today, people want to work for companies that are diverse, and people want to do business with companies that are diverse because, you know, one, you're being inclusive of all people, and you know you're helping everyone, and then two, like I mentioned earlier, you get those unique ideas. So a company with fresh, unique ideas with different perspectives tends to operate better than one that has this square peg, and you know you're trying to fit all these ideas into it, and they don't always fit. And so there are three kinds of diversity that exist in the workplace. There is surface level diversity, deep level diversity, and hidden diversity. So we're going to talk a little bit about each one of those. Surface level diversity is in the form of characteristics of individuals that are readily visible, including but not limited to like age, body type, visible disabilities, your race, or your sex. So these are things that you can look at somebody and you can easily identify them. You can easily discriminate against somebody based on these things. The next one is deep level diversity. This deals with characteristics that are non-observable, such as attitudes, values, and beliefs, such as religion. You know, Elder Hugh B. Brown, he talked about, he's the one who spoke about the currant bush and how it was cut down. But preceding that that concept, he talks about how he was up for a promotion in the military, but he was denied it solely on the basis of his religion. So that's discrimination based on a deep level diversity. And then there's hidden diversity. This is characteristics that are deep level, but maybe concealed or revealed at discretion by certain individuals to people. And typically this deals with how you feel on the inside. They deal with sexual orientation. So, you know, you can't discriminate against somebody based upon their sexual orientation. And, you know, all these diversities are very important. And it's important that we're inclusive of others. And, you know, it's not always easy to do, but it's good that we do it because in the long run, we get better ideas, we get better perspectives, and overall we do better.
This is the hardest question, just so you all know. You're muted, Daniel.
Thank you for that. Sorry. Diversity in the workplace. So yeah, this is super important. Kind of like I mentioned, there's just different levels of diversity, but if you go through this section in the chapter, it really breaks down everything into percentages. I'm not going to go through each percentage because it's a lot of information. But interestingly enough, back in 1997, researchers were estimating that diversity would increase amongst you know, Black people in the workforce, Asians, women, Latinos, up to a certain percentage by 2020. But by the time that year came around, the United States, or actually by 2016, my apologies, by 2016. And by the time we passed that year, the United States has already surpassed those predictions. So that's really good news. That means that we're doing really good at making sure that everybody has opportunities to enter the workforce, regardless of whatever sort of diversity identity they may have. But it breaks it down in a little bit more into gender. It talks about how you know, men still make up the majority of the workforce in the United States compared to women, but that number amongst women is increasing. It's increasing year by year, and it's not like a super huge difference either. It's both the men are in the low 50% and the women are in the high 40s, so they're like neck and neck right there. And then it was interesting to learn about what is called the glass ceiling. This deals with the lack of advancement opportunities that are awarded to qualified women within the workplace. And, oftentimes, when you hear that, women don't receive, or just anyone based on their gender don't receive certain jobs because of their gender, it's sometimes easy to dismiss that, oh, well, in the workplace, we award people based on work ethic and, productivity. But sometimes it goes a little bit deeper than that. And that's what the glass ceiling is. It's not necessarily something that you can see, but there are certain limitations that are being applied. For example, or the upper level managers and decision makers in a business, traditionally are predominantly men. And as a result, they interact with each other and not so much with the lower level executives or lower level managers, who tend to be people who are entering the workforce, which historically are the women. So as a result, they're not meeting these people, so they don't have the opportunities to be advanced in their career because simply the executives don't know these people. So that's interesting thing about gender there. And then moving on, it talks about how race is continuing to balance out as well. There's tons of improvement that can continue to be done in the United States. But it was interesting about, the last question was, is sexual harassment against the law? And yes, it is. And it was interesting to note that discrimination, sexual harassment deals a lot with females. They receive it more than men do. But it does, both men and women can be sexually harassed within the workplace. It was interesting to note that discrimination against Black employees, typically it deals a lot with sexual harassment against Black females in the workplace. So there's still a lot of progress that's been made over the past 20 years as far as diversity in the workforce. And we're just seeing that, if we keep working hard, we keep respecting people, those numbers will continue to go up.
Perfect. So I'm going to talk about the Cox and Blake, what they talked about in their study as far as what they list as 6 advantages of diversity in the workplace. Thank goodness Key and Peele did not create this. I can only imagine the disaster that would be. So 6 things it talked about was, one advantage was cost. And with cost, it's going to save a company money, because obviously, if you can imagine, if you have a diverse company and you're adhering to the laws and regulations put in place by the government, then the likelihood of you being sued is less than a company who does not have a diverse company. They don't have things in place to prevent certain things from happening, or if they do happen, to make sure those things get dealt with in an appropriate manner. And then resource acquisition, having a more diverse work environment, as Daniel noted, more people are drawn to that. And so you're going to have a larger pool of applicants for job openings, which allows you to be able to find the right people for the right job, instead of just finding a body to fill the position, but it's not the correct person to fill a position. And then system flexibility. This talked about the advantage of that is it allows people to think differently, and allows them to adapt their perspective as they communicate and interact with a group with more diverse people who don't have their same thinking, their same mindset, because of how they grew up and they're having in the same class. And then they also talk about marketing. You can gain a broader perspective for different cultures, which will allow you as a company to potentially find out how to better market your product or services to certain, diversities or individuals that maybe you didn't know, because you just didn't know that culture, or that how to market for them before, until you had someone who had that experience. Then problem solving, this talks about with problem solving and creativity, having a more diverse group of individuals and employees. The more they work together, they're going to be able to think of better ideas to address potential problems and issues, because again, they're not all coming from the same background. They're coming from different backgrounds, and they're meshing all together to work to fit like a puzzle. Again, you're going to be able to have the potential to address more problems, or know how to address them when they arise. And then creativity, help prevent what's called groupthink, which is a group pressure that it prevents ideas from flowing freely. I've personally experienced this. I didn't never know what it was, but when you're in an environment where you're sharing ideas and you're all of the same background or all of the same culture, it's hard at times to feel like you can speak up, and that's the groupthink method. Is it makes it challenged to present ideas that you might have because you're worried about how you might be portrayed. Perfect. And this next one we're talking about, that last I was talking about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This just talks about, again, a little bit what Daniel was talking about, but basically it's going over, the different, you can't discriminate against age, disability, national origin. If you're pregnant, race, color, religious, or sex, or sex. You can't receive unfair treatment because of that. Unfortunately, that does happen, as Daniel mentioned. We are making progress as a nation, but ultimately that progress starts with us as individuals. We have to make the certain progress in order to affect our companies. In this slide right here, just goes over the different acts and things that were put into place and when they were put into place to protect the employees of the work culture.
Okay, so there are some benefits of diversity that we just talked about, being cost, creativity, problem solving, like a lot of different perspectives that come into play and allow you to be a more effective team. There are certain theories that were talked about that are used in the HR departments. And it's interesting to see the different perspectives just based on these theories. So the first one is the cognitive diversity hypothesis, which basically suggests that multiple perspectives between different cultural differences and organizational members, they result in good outcomes, meaning that you'll have a good team of dedicated to problem solving and innovation. There's another theory called the similarity attraction paradigm, where it holds that the individual preferences for interacting with others like themselves, that would result in a negative effect on the group or organizational outcomes, which I think is really interesting. I would agree with the first one, being that the diversity is a pro to having that in a team versus the just being similarly, or I'm sorry, that the similar attraction is also meaning that if a group of people get along or they're similar, have similar beliefs. We see this a lot in, or not a lot, but I feel like I've seen it in the growing up in Las Vegas. There weren't many members of the church in my high school, and so I essentially clinged to people that were similar to me, meaning the few members that were in that were also in my school. This would be probably a good example of the similarity attraction paradigm. It's essentially a social identity theory. And then the last theory is the justification suppression model, which explains that the conditions are what make the individuals act on prejudices. Sorry. I think that it's really interesting how hypotheses apply even to HR and how everything can be put to a science. This is why succession planning and strategic planning for a team or for your company is really important, because you pull out the strengths and weaknesses of different people and different backgrounds, and you put them together, and they're able to become great problem solvers and innovative. So. Okay, and then this was also an interesting just another touch on how perspectives can be a great power to how your team works. In the chapter, it talks about the three main perspectives. You have the integration and learning perspective, the access and legitimacy perspective, and the discrimination and fairness perspective. All of these perspectives you see in many different types of people and what their priorities are. For example, somebody who may be homosexual, their priority in the workplace would probably be closer to the discrimination and fairness perspective, making sure that they get treated just as everyone else, versus somebody who is an immigrant might be more prioritizing the integration and learning perspective and making sure that they're not being discriminated for the lack of their knowledge just for coming into the country so suddenly. And those are just, examples off the top of my head. We probably could go for days thinking about what perspectives different people have and how they fall into these categories. I think it's really important for an HR management to essentially create planning that would help include all of these perspectives, creating better unity in your employees. Because as long as nobody feels discriminated for their different reasons, they'll feel success. They'll feel welcomed at work, and they'll feel like they can show up and be a part of a team. So
We hope you guys enjoyed our presentation. Thank you.